my friend Paul Huszar. He's the CEO, president, and majority owner of VetCor, LLC, which is a restoration company focused on hiring veterans and was recently recognized as the Bright House Network's Startup of the Year in the Tampa Bay region. Lieutenant Colonel Huszar retired from the Army after 23 years of active military service, including 4 combat tours in Iraq, 1 unaccompanied tour in Korea, and operational deployments to Thailand, Libya, Honduras, Panama, and Haiti. He earned a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from the United States Military Academy and a master's degree in civil engineering from the University of Washington. His last assignment on active duty was as the Director of Training and Leader Development of the U.S. Army Engineer School. And now I would like you all to join me in standing for the presentation of the colors.
Colors. Okay. Up. Forward. Mark. Forward. Mark. Colors. Hold. Present. Arms. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Forward. Arms. Colors. Hold. Colors. Colors turn. Arch.
Okay, can we give a great big round of applause for Please take your seats. So can you hear me okay?
Yep.
It's all right, I like to move around and get a little bit animated, but I need your help in this endeavor. I had the opportunity to give this presentation last week at an insurance conference in South Carolina, and I was the last speaker of the day for an insurance conference. Okay. So the energy was way, way, way low. So I'm hoping, being bright and early in the morning with a bunch of human resource professionals, I'm going to get a little motivated. I'm an extrovert if you haven't been able to tell, and that means I gain my energy from the crowd. So am I going to gain a lot of energy this morning? Okay, so we had a couple Air Force guys up here. Their energy, all right, you know, we got to have a little fun. Army, Air Force, Navy, all that stuff. In the Army, Marines are good. So here's the difference between Army and Marines, right? The difference between Army and Marines. Thank you for volunteering, by the way. We say hooah, and they say hoorah. All right. So either way, you can do a hooah or a hoorah. Ready? 1, 3. 1, 2, 3. Hoorah! All right, not too bad. All right. So we got a little energy going on. My apologies to this side of the room. We'll see what we can do. I have a few graphs. Hopefully not too boring, but I should be able to convey the information I'm trying to get to anyway. All right. So, first of all, it's my distinct honor and privilege to be here this morning. Thanks, Jen, for inviting me. And what a great topic, and I really appreciate you all selecting this as a topic, not just for this presentation, but what you've done with respect to your actions, inviting veterans here that are looking for employment, and really taking this on as a cause. It is my reason for existence now. It is my reason for growing VetCor. And it always helps when you have a reason beyond just kind of the bottom line is the metric. So I really appreciate that from the bottom of my heart. So what I'd like to do is really start at kind of the 50,000 foot level and talk about some context of why we're in the situation that we are in, as I've had an opportunity to study this challenge. So, of course, I'm a military briefer still. I can't get that out of me. There's the agenda. All right, so I want to start out with the demographics of the population. HR professionals can understand demographics, right? So this chart is a chart that shows the U.S. population. This side of the room, all you need to know is that the U.S. population is rising. Okay, it shows from like 1800 to the current time, but I think it's something like 321 million. But it's growing. And I'm an engineer, so I like graphs. That's why I put it in there. But it's a positive slope. Okay, more people are being born than people are dying. So increasing population rate. Okay. This chart is a chart that shows population, the percentage of the population that serve in the military. So that could be active duty, Guard, Reserve, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. And really on this chart, all you need to know is it peaked at about 8% in World War II, went down, peaked again for Korea, went down, peaked again Vietnam, went down, peaked again for Desert Storm, sort of. And now, the takeaway of this is, and that's, for those of you who can't see, it was about a little over 8% during World War II. Now it's less than 0.5% of the population. Now, so that's good, right? That's good that we are the greatest nation in the world, the most powerful nation in the world. We have the most powerful armed services ever to roam the planet. And you can be sure of that. And we're doing it with the lowest percentage of the population we've ever had in our history. That's good. But that's also potentially kind of dangerous. And if I asked you this question and kind of tried to put this in context, would anyone have guessed that those are the demographics that we're dealing with? Right? And so now let me go on a little bit further and explain some of this stuff. Okay, this is a chart of the demographics of the veteran population. So on the left, it's present day and it's projected out 30 years. So there are about 21.2 million veterans alive in the United States. This chart is a declining slope. Over the next 30 years, the veteran population is declining, which means, unfortunately, more veterans are dying than we are creating more veterans. And that's a symptom of the previous chart I showed, where our military is so small compared to the population as well, right? What it means also is about 40% of our veterans alive today are World War II and Korea War era veterans. All right? Which makes sense when you look at the bump of the spike in the population with respect to World War II when we mobilized the population. And again, it's great that we don't have to do that and we can still, for the most part, kick the butt of anybody who wants to pick a fight with us. That's good, all right? This chart, I think, is really interesting. And this one is probably about the only one that is you really need a chart to see, but I'll explain it, hopefully in a way. So the green line is men, the yellow line is women, and on the left it's the 18 to 24-year-old demographic now, and on the right it's the 90-year-old plus demographic, okay? It's the percentage of the population who are actually veterans. So if you're 90 years old and a man alive today, what's it say, 74%? 74% of your peer group are veterans. The interesting, and I think personally unfortunate, I didn't used to think this as a junior officer, the numbers for women have been maintained pretty consistently, anywhere between 3 and 2% of women are veterans. And I think that is vastly underrepresenting women in the potential we have in women. By the way, anybody see, this is off on a tangent, anybody see the viral video on the female softball player from West Point? Wasn't that amazing? So, huh? Yes. Yes. And then she was on Fox News. I encourage you to go see that video if you haven't. It was a Sports Center top play of the week. A young cadet at West Point. I'm a West Point grad. She's coming home, NCAA championship or NCAA tournament. They're down a run. The catcher has the ball, clearly beats the throw. This girl jumps over the catcher, like 4 feet over the catcher, lands, and then tags the base. I encourage you to see it, right? And then she was interviewed. She did such a great job on Fox News And I was just so delighted to find out one of my former company commanders is her tactical officer at West Point. So I asked her to get her my autograph, or get me her autograph. I used to be an Army baseball player back in the day, and I said that was a job well done. But so the reason I divert to that is it just shows it's not even a debate anymore about ladies being in the military. I think it's a silly question. They can do just as much as the guys can. But also it's interesting as human resource professionals, I'll give you this little tidbit too. My policy at VetCor is I hire veterans and those who have the same value of veterans. And the reason that I can't hire exclusively veterans, anybody want to take a guess? It's discrimination. You know why? Because women are unfairly represented in the veteran population, as indicated by that. That's the reason why, according to the Federal Equal Employment Commission. And I think that's tragic. Anyway, that's a little aside, but there it is. So the challenge with this, though, is think about it. When that 18 to 24-year-old demographic of men who are 7% of 18 to 24-year-old men are veterans. Okay? 90-year-olds, 74%. So guess what happens when that demographic of 18 to 24 become 90? Anybody want to take a guess? The number doesn't really change, because when do you become a veteran? When you're 18 to 24. So it's not like you decide, hey, I think I'll become a veteran when I'm 32 years old, right? So as this demographic becomes 90, this chart for our demographics in the US will probably be flat, which is scary. I mean, unless there's a big war or something. And again, it's good news for our country. But what that means to you all is fewer and fewer people then know a veteran. You have fewer and fewer cousins, neighbors, you name it, where you actually know a veteran. And so if you don't know a veteran, you haven't walked in their shoes, then there becomes this disconnect. So remember, increasing population, decreasing veteran population, there becomes a gap between the veterans and the society that they serve to protect and defend. And I'm not sure that that's necessarily good. And I'm not trying to make a political statement or anything, but it is what it is. And so you should understand that those are the conditions that exist, okay? So now I want to talk about defining some of the barriers and dispelling some of the rumors, okay? So first of all, they all must have PTSD, right? That's absurd. That's just absolutely absurd. Now, some of them do. Many of them do, frankly. Some of you people may. But that's true, because PTSD can happen if you're involved in a car accident, any type of traumatic event. The other thing I'll tell you is my wife and I had this interesting conversation shortly after I retired. And it went something like this. I was talking about PTSD, and she goes, "You don't have PTSD." I said, "Well, why not?" "Because you're you." Okay? But aside from me being me, and you know me, why wouldn't I have PTSD? Let's see, I have 4 combat deployments. The last one I commanded an airborne combat engineer battalion. My platoon leader was blown up right in front of me. In 2005, I was involved in a vehicle-borne IED incident where my truck, where a car completely blew up about 30 meters from my... So why wouldn't I have PTSD? She said, because you're you. I said, well, you're right. Because by the time I deployed to the 3 of the deployments, I also went to Desert Storm. That was kind of much different, much easier way of fighting wars back then. The Army had invested about 20 years of experience in me. And so I was, I think, hardened and more callous, and so I was ready for it. Does that mean I don't have nightmares sometimes and remember the green flash and the truck, my platoon leader's truck exploding? No, I still do, but it doesn't really affect me. But I said, here's the problem, babe. If I'm Specialist Huszar, and you're Mrs. Specialist Huszar, he says the same thing. You don't have PTSD because you're you. And that guy doesn't have 20 years of experience. And so sometimes family members miss that, miss those signs. So just be aware of the signs. And if you see them, they can get help. And you can very easily deal, I won't say easily, that's not a good choice of words. One can effectively deal with those challenges. Now, in VetCor, it's pretty easy to deal with those challenges because they look at me and they go, oh, the CEO of our company's been blown up. So, hey, he gets what this feels like, so let's just come in and we'll talk about it. And everybody around him does. And that's why I love this concept that we're developing here. But it's a rumor. The other thing I'll tell you also is the people who choose to go in the military are generally, they like outdoors a lot. You get a lot of hunters who have experienced and put their hands in flesh. And so that some of those things, I mean, it's kind of what we found, right? And so some of those things aren't as affected by that, which is a good thing. The other analogy I like to make is how do championship sports teams, for example, practice the 2-minute drill? You know, when there's all kinds of stress on them. How do they do well at the 2-minute drill? They practice it. They practice it. It's the reps that count, right? So in the military, they get a lot of reps. And there's some amazing things that we're doing now in the military. You go out to a national training center at Fort Irwin, California before you deploy, and you're blown up in an accident or whatever, and you know what? There's an amputee right there. There's an actor, there's a paid actor who's an amputee who has all this blood and guts thing hanging off his knee. You know, the young soldiers who've never been to the National Training Center just go, they think they're going to triage on, you know, on a doll or something, and then it's a real live person. And they're like, oh, okay. They find out the real live person doesn't have a leg, and they got some bloody gooey stuff sticking out the end of it. All of a sudden, it becomes more real. And so, let me reassure you that we're doing those things in the military to help deal with that. So, the more you can practice that, the better the reps. The more the reps, then the less you have to deal, the less challenge you have to deal with those traumatic events. So I hear that a lot. I do. I hear that a lot. So I want to dispel that rumor, okay? And if they do have challenges, there are ways to get help. And there are plenty of resources out there to get help, okay? All they do is shoot, move, and communicate. It's a military thing, but what that means is, you know, the armor, artillery, fighter pilots, you know, there's just a bunch of knuckle-dragging people that need to go to war, break things. Okay? And there are a few of them out there. But here's the deal. What it takes to run the military is what it takes to run a city. And I was the dean of the Army's Engineer School, so I trained plumbers, carpenters, electricians. So that's not all they do. There's a thing called the tooth-to-tail ratio in the military. The tooth, the pointy end of the spear, the one with the teeth to bite into the enemy, is only about 30% of the fighting force. The other 70% are the logisticians that enable the fighting force. So 70% of the veterans weren't really combat military occupational specialties at all anyway. They were the mailmen, the medics, the plumbers, carpenters, electricians, all those things, and they have very marketable skills. Now even the ones that did, all they do is shoot, move, and communicate, come out with these tremendous values and tremendous leadership capability, and they're lifelong learners. We'll talk about that in a second. So that's not all they do is shoot, move, and communicate. Translation is the challenge, and I'm sure some of you have seen this in resumes that have reached out to try and help. So I try and put this in perspective, okay? Jen mentioned that my last duty assignment, I was the Director of Training and Leader Development for the U.S. Army Engineer School. At this point in time, you're supposed to all go, wow. That was an impressive title, Paul, all right? Okay, anybody know what that means? Director of Training and Leader Development. If you can do it with one word, why would you do that? Do it with 5 in the military. That's the way we say it, right? So my counterpart in the Air Force, because the Air Force is it's the youngest service, so we like to kind of tease them that they're the closest to the civilian population. The title of my peer at the Air Force Civil Engineering School was the Dean. There you go. So now when I talk to folks like you, and on my resume it says the Dean of the Army Engineer School. Because that's what it was in civilian terms. So there's that aspect of, we have to make these job descriptions that sound important, so we'll add more words to them, right? So there's that aspect of it, okay? But then now, as the Dean of the Army's Engineer School, my responsibilities included the training development for all the Army's plumbers, carpenters, electricians, masons, truck drivers, divers, firefighters, all marketable skills, right? All things that we need in the civilian world. And then I also did the execution of the training for all the young officers, warrant officers, and non-commissioned officers. Okay, a lot of talent, by the way. So when we trained those plumbers, carpenters, electricians, and then sent them off to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Fort Hood, Texas, Fort Lewis, Washington, and I think 52 different states and territories in the Guard and Reserve. Which credential do you think they got? So where does the credentialing authority reside for plumbers, carpenters, electricians? State level. So look, I knew this going into it, and I tried to make this my mission to solve this problem. I had determined it was an unsolvable problem because I could not get 50 different states to come together. It was hard enough to get two. And I mean, look, there are other competing interests in this deal as well. Labor unions why would labor unions who tend to, are behind some of the credentialing programs in the civilian world, why would they want this population that has been trained to not have to go through their training, right? And why would they want the burden of trying to have to certify our training? I understand that. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand that. And so it's not just a translational challenge, it's also a challenge with credentialing. So now, my company is a restoration company. I hope to get a general contracting license soon. And I run into the same problems, by the way, with my professional engineer license. It's in the state of Missouri. If I applied for what's called comity or to kind of transfer to Florida, it's almost as if I was a new college graduate. I have to go back in time and cover all of my history all over again. It's a challenge. So we're wrestling with that, but I don't think that problem's going to be solved. So if you see that, one, the translational challenges, but two, the credentialing challenge. And the same thing is true now. It gets a little bit easier with some of the things like IT, which are kind of, Microsoft A++ certificate, those things. And so the IT folks in the military are getting a little bit better at that. Some of the medical requirements, truck drivers, CDLs, things like that. But there's a real challenge with credentialing, okay? So here's my favorite topic, the resume, okay? What's a resume? What is a resume? If we're intellectually honest about that. Can I borrow this thing? Okay. First of all, one page, front and back, is that acceptable? Not more than one, or even one page, whatever. All right, so here's my resume, sir. I want you to read that. And on that piece of paper, I'm going to tell you how great I am, so you'll hire me in your company. Is that fair? Okay? And now, you're like, oh, this guy, I don't understand his translations, he doesn't have any credentials, but okay, I'll take the interview. Okay? Sir, 15 minutes is all I got. Let me tell you how great I am and why you should hire me. Now, if we're intellectually honest, isn't that really what a resume is in an interview? Right? Okay, so now, erase in your mind this impression of me and how much time we've had is because I'm an extrovert to the extreme. And now let's take the average military person who spent all their adult lives. Now, whether that's someone who transitioned when they were 18 to 24 and went right out of high school and spent 6 years in the Air Force, or whether it's someone like me that spent 23 years in the Army after 4 years at West Point being totally indoctrinated about what right looks like. It's all about the team, right? There is no I in team. Let me assure you, there is no I in team. For 27 years of my adult life, it's been beaten into my head. There is no I in team, right? So how comfortable do you think I am writing one page about myself? And how comfortable do you think I am talking about myself? I'm convinced that Jen did the bio before the Pledge of Allegiance, because I usually get up and try and hip check her out of the way, because I just don't like that. It makes me uncomfortable. I love talking about veterans, if you couldn't tell, and I'm passionate about that, but I don't like this. Okay, if you want the rest of my bio, you can find it someplace, right? They just want to support the team. In fact, if you're on active duty, in the Army, I don't know what the Marines call it. In the Army, we call it a Spotlight Ranger. If you try and stick out beyond your peers, you're called a Spotlight Ranger. And you're cast aside. So now you take these great young men and women with all these great values, who all of their adult lives, their formative years, right? And it's been ingrained in their head that it's about the team, and now you bring them into a society where they have to tell someone how great they are on one page, piece of paper, front and back, and then spend 15 minutes interviewing. Any reason why they don't interview well? And don't do resumes well? Okay, and so usually when I talk to fellow employers about that, they're like, well, yeah, but that's the guy I want on my team. That's the gal I want on my team. I want someone who's focused on selfless service, who's committed to the goals of the organization. Yeah, but the challenge is you can't get it past the fact that they don't have any credentials on their resume, you can't understand their resume, and you don't get that they're not comfortable writing a resume. So once if you can get past all that stuff, then hop in. The water's warm in this pool, come on in, join our team, okay? How do we really find a job? It takes a network, right? There's a saying when I was in Iraq in 2009-10, combating IEDs, we used to say, you know, the IEDs was a social network. You had the bomb maker, the bomb financer, the bomb implanter, all this stuff. It was a network. And we used to say, it takes a network to defeat a network. And that was true. So we try and harness all this intelligence, not just to find the bomb implacer, but we call it go left of the boom. Before the boom happened, to try and find the financer, the bomb maker, or the bomb supplier, all these types of things. It was a network. It takes a network to defeat a network. And so that's what I tell my fellow veterans. I moved to Tampa in July of 2013 from Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, also known as Fort Lost in the Woods, and I had zero network. So I reached out to West Point Alumni Association, I reached out to the American Society of Civil Engineers, Society of American Military Engineers, and I tried to create one, and as you can tell, that's not hard for me because I'm extrovert. But even then, it was still challenging, and it wasn't until I developed a network that I was able to find opportunities. And now, you know, I've told, and somebody gave me a blinding fastly obvious, on my resume before I moved to Tampa, you know, I had my address on it. I was told that's what you put on there. They said, dummy, your address shows Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. You know, don't do that, because they don't want, your employers in Tampa, Florida don't want to pay relocation costs. So why would they do that? I wrote in my cover letter that the military is paying my, yeah, cover letter, are you kidding me? So now when I talk to veterans, if you're coming from out of state, don't put your address on there. I didn't get this, I don't understand this, but they're like, really? The Army always just paid for my PCS permanent change of station, I never even thought about that. It's because we don't understand those aspects of the civilian world. And so there's this huge disconnect. Go back to that gap between the rising population, declining veteran population, huge disconnect, okay? And then lastly, today's job market. The competition for talent is getting pretty intense, right? Of those people who put their arms up, put them up again, please, that are looking to hire people right now. Put your arms up. How many of you are looking to hire shitty people? Now, how many of you are looking to hire people who are fit, polite, show up on time, treat people with dignity and respect, have great values, morals, work ethic, willing to roll their sleeves up, get dirty? Okay. And oh, by the way, they're lifelong learners. So let's talk about this. I had the opportunity to give this presentation when we won the Bright House Business Awards, and this was drilled into my head as a young major. And I used this in that presentation. I'll read the question to you. It's a question from the Gallup organization's poll that they do every year. And they've done this poll for the last 30 years. This was as of June of last year. I'm going to read a list of institutions in American society. Please tell me how much confidence you yourself have in each one, a great deal, quite a lot, some, or very little. So for the past 30 years, anyone want to take a guess at which institution the American public have the most faith and confidence in? 30 years running. U.S. military. Okay? Anybody want to guess what's last? You guys can't see the slide. You want to guess what's last? It is Congress. Yes, it is Congress. So interesting. At the conference last week, I presented right after a guy who was talking about millennials and generational differences. Here's an interesting generational difference, by the way. Big business is second to last. What did big business used to be? Big blue energy companies that didn't spill all over our Gulf and all that kind of stuff. They were up here, right? But now look what's number 2. Small business. You guys can't see it, small business. Okay? And so in the presentation for the Bright House Awards, I said, so I saw this survey and I said, hey, why not start a small business based on the cultures, norms, and values of the U.S. military? Instant respect. Yeah. And it's true. And it's true. Our customers love our technicians. 96% exceptionally satisfied. I love to brag about these guys. I don't like to brag about myself, but my technicians and veterans, 96% exceptionally satisfied. Can you find another service industry in any industry where you get that kind of... And oh, by the way, when does the cable guy show up? Wait. The Bright House Networks gave me the award, not cable. When does the HVAC repairman show up? When do they tell you he's going to show up? It's a window, right? Between 8 and 12, and he shows up at 1:30. When a veteran tells you they're going to show up, what time do they show up? 15 minutes prior, they drive around until it's exactly the right time to show up. You're like, wow. So, veterans' values, I could talk about this all day long, and I really could, because it's ingrained in me. I mean, I still know loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, personal courage. Those were the Army values, and I retired 2.5, almost 3 years ago now. It's an acronym, it spells out leadership, so it helps there. But they're ingrained, right? And these are just some of the things, integrity, reliability, leadership, trustworthiness, never accept defeat, always complete the mission, all those types of things. Now, most people when asked, I want this type of person, but we don't really hire based on this. It's kind of a screening criteria. You have to have this, but you don't really know if you have this because it's not on the resume, right? So you have to find something quantifiable and qualifiable, which is generally go back to those credentials and skill sets and things that they write about past, and that's where the challenge comes in. All right, so why hire a vet? Hopefully I've already started to make some compelling reasons, but they grew up with cultures, norms, and values that are ingrained in them. When I go to hiring conferences, I put up the same slide that I use, the same brochure that I use to attract clients and customers. I talk about trustworthiness, teamwork, etc. And the same things that you want as a client or a customer are the same things that they want to be a part of in a team. They want to be associated. They love the idea of wearing VetCor on their shirts because they self-identify as a veteran. So when they go up and say, "Good morning, sir. Good morning, ma'am." First of all, did you just call me sir and ma'am? Wait a minute. What happened here? But they love identifying with that. This cultures, norms, and values, they're just ingrained in them. And they're not going to leave. Trust me. I like to say, again, following the millennial presentation the last time, my sergeant major, by the way, I call him my sergeant major because he's a retired sergeant major. My COO, Chief Operating Officer, is a retired sergeant major. He and I have known each other for 25 years. He was a platoon sergeant in the company that I was second in command of in Desert Storm. And if you ever want to start anything from scratch, I highly recommend having a sergeant major, a former Army sergeant major there right beside you as your right-hand man. He likes to say, he compares the typical, I won't use the name Serpro, but the typical technician in our competitors, right, is the typical millennial, ponytail, has a little bit of alcohol in their breath, doesn't show up to work on time, and compare that to a young man or woman like we just had present the pillars up here. I mean, come on. You know what the difference is? They're millennials too. But they've all had a sergeant in their life that said, "You won't call someone sir and ma'am." Okay, I get that. And it's amazing how that kind of holds true in their cultures, norms, and values the rest of their life. Okay? Here's an interesting thing that most people don't think about. They are lifelong learners. So even if they don't possess the exact skills that you need, they're used to what we call PCS, a permanent change of station. They're used to PCSing every 2 to 3 years, changing jobs. The other thing is, during the recent wars, we've had to kind of reinvent our military. So there were artillerymen used to pulling lanyards and shooting artillery shells downrange, and all of a sudden they have to become the mayoral cell of a city. And that's what they do, because we weren't shooting a whole lot of artillery in the wars, but we were doing a lot of peacekeeping and counterinsurgency operations. So we ran out of units that did that kind of stuff, and we had to recreate them. Lifelong learners. So it's kind of like, Google. There's a field manual, Army regulation, whatever they call it in the Air Force, if they have them in the Air Force, I don't know. But they're used to finding a technical manual for their hand receipts and inventory and everything. They're good with technology because the technology changes so quickly. There's a new M16, M4 rifle now. There's an 8-cog sight with a little red dot in it they have to become exceptional with. All the radios change every 2 to 3 years. So they go back and they read the manuals. They figure it out. They're lifelong learners. They're not afraid to do that, not afraid to research.
They've been doing it every 2 to 3 years. Let me give you an example. There are 2 combat airborne engineer battalions in the Army. I was privileged to command one of them, okay? It's about a 600-person organization, and my head used to look like that right there, except I had a little tuft right there. It was high and tight, because that's the standard. Now people kind of freak out for me when you get a high and tight running around, so I decided to civilianize myself. But okay, I used to be much more fit, running in front of 600 soldiers down Ardennes at Fort Bragg, taking them 4 miles out, bringing them out, doing push-ups and all that kind of stuff. I mean, these young soldiers, brave young men and women, there wasn't a better job in the U.S. Army engineers, and it was a very coveted job, and I loved every minute of it, okay? Jumping out of airplanes at 10 minutes after midnight, 800 feet above ground level, going 130 knots with 300 other paratroopers in the air. Guess who was the first one to jump out? Me. I love it. I'm sorry, can you tell? That's why I get all excited about this, okay? So I went from doing that job to being the dean of the engineering school. I mean, there are not 2 job descriptions that are more diametrically opposed than the U.S. Army Engineer Regiment. I'm confident of it. What did I know about being the dean of the engineer school? But you know, there's a place to learn, and I'm used to it. I had to figure it out. I was a supply officer before. I went from being a supply officer to an operations officer. Operations to logistics, you know. So they're used to doing, changing jobs and figuring it out. Now, that's one of the challenges, that we don't get really specialized in that, and sometimes for HR professionals that can be a challenge too, because you don't see the experience that you're looking for. But if you're willing to give them the chance, based on some of the things we talked about, perhaps you can find it, and perhaps they can impress you. They have recipes for success. And then the next bullet, everything is worthy of an AAR. Who knows what an AAR is? Anyone? Okay. What is it?
After action review.
AAR, after action review. She's a veteran, she knows it, right? It's a recipe for success. After every mission, after every job, consultation with the client, we do an AAR. What's an AAR? What happened, why it happened, how we can improve. I was having this informal conversation with somebody the other day, and they go, what did you just say? So it's an after action review. What happened, why it happened, how we can improve. Because, say that one more time, let me get my, he starts taking notes. I'm like, we just know that, right? You knew what an AAR was. We do it all the time. And if it's short, we call it a hot wash. Military decision-making process. Troop leading procedures. I could go on and on. The really cool one, the art of battle command. Check this out. If you want to solve a problem and you want to get a group of people to follow you do that, understand the problem. You personally as a commander. Visualize the problem and the solution. Understand, visualize. Describe what you want to happen to your subordinates and your team. Direct it to happen, and then assess measures of performance and measures of effectiveness. Understand, visualize, describe, direct, assess. Art of battle command. Measures of performance. Are we doing things right? Measures of effectiveness. Are we doing the right things? Are the things that we're doing right contributing the right effects that we wanted to achieve? Would anybody like to have that in their organization? It's a recipe for success. I didn't make that up. The Army did. It's up here. I can't get it out. There are all kinds of things. When I was sitting there preparing for my last speech, I just went over them. I was looking at this, and I just started, just by memory, all of my recipes for success of the things that I learned in the military. You know? Receive the mission, initiate movement, troop leading, all these kinds of things. And they come for free with the veteran. Okay? They have real value, and there are incentives to at least try them. If I haven't made a compelling reason by now, David Davis over there, raise your hand, David. David works for the VA. He and I became close friends after I started the company, because you transition and you learn about the VA and all the benefits as a transitioning veteran, but nobody ever told me about the hire veterans when I became an employer. So I went through and reread all the literature, and I was like, I still can't figure this out. I love the VA. The VA is the second largest arm in the federal government. Anybody want to guess how many employees are in the VA? How many?
200,000.
And you know what it is now, David? I think it's upwards of 250,000. And it makes sense because DoD is the largest bureaucracy, right? And the VA is in charge of taking all the former DoD members. So Okay, there's some challenges with that. And I told David, I want to learn this program called the Special Employer Incentive Program because I've dealt with government contracting in my days as an Army Corps of Engineers officer, and there's nothing easy about that. Anybody do federal government contracts? There's nothing easy about them, right? It's bureaucratic, right? So I had to register with SAM, the System of Award Management, to become a teammate with David and hire veterans. But if you're willing to do that, the Special Employer Incentive Program will pay half of a veteran's salary for 6 months. You willing to take that chance now? Right? And all you have to do is say, here's the training program that I'm going to use to incorporate them into my organization. Now, the first time I did it, it took about 90 days, and that wasn't really responsive. And every day I was calling my young man who I wanted to hire and said, listen, I want to hire you now, but I really want to make this program work so I can come talk to audiences like you and tell them how it works. The second time I did it, it took about 30 days. So not bad. And you can interview them. You see Dave, say, hey, I'm interested. Here's the position we're looking to fill. Pretty decent incentive, right? The Career Source, which are the local workforce boards, Career Source Tampa Bay, Career Source Broward County, we use all of them. They have similar programs at the state level, usually lower, not as great value as the VA, maybe I think 9 weeks or something like that. I've not personally used any of those programs, but I've personally used those entities to hire veterans because they all have separate veterans initiatives. By the way, anybody want to take a guess what my healthcare bill is for VetCor? We have 25 employees. I know I don't have to pay it because I'm under 50 or whatever, but I would. Anybody want to take a guess what my healthcare bill is?
Very low.
Anybody want for my senior management, my COO, and his family? You know what I pay?
0.
You know what I pay for me?
0.
Actually, that's not true. I pay, I think it's $553 a year. Sorry, for TRICARE, because I'm retired. And all of my senior management, who I would have hired anyway, because they're all complete studs and they all served for me in combat before. And all I just have to say is task and purpose. Here's what we're doing, action left, and they go, Roger. You want to talk about an agile organization, right? And they know how I work. I say, hey, look, you're going to see opportunities before I ever will. As long as you're operating within the vision and intent, you execute. And they get it. You know, people think, you know, that we're not an agile organization. It's very structured and organized. You know, this is not true. Tried 600 groups, they would call them LGOPs, little groups of paratroopers. 600 paratroopers all over a drop zone in the middle of the night running around trying to find stuff, right? So anyway, back to my point though, of all these managers, I would hire them anyway, but they're all retired military. They're all get TRICARE. What does that save you a year per person? Now are you willing to try them? Now, Huszar, you're speaking my language as a businessman. All right. The other thing is, if you find it, by the way, MacDill Air Force Base is the only base in the world that has 2 combatant commands, 4-star level commands. The whole world geographically is divided up into combatant commands, and so CENTCOM, central area in the world, Middle East, Central Command is here. Then they also have functional commands, Transportation Command, how to get troops and equipment all over the world. Special Forces Command is a functional command, 4-star level. 2 4-star level commands at MacDill. With 4 stars comes what? 3 stars and 2 stars and 1 star and colonels and lieutenant colonels. Guys like me are a dime a dozen there. And they like Tampa. I love Tampa. That's why I'm here. They want to stay in Tampa. What do you think you can get them for? All I have to do is wake up. All I have to do is wake up, and I make more than the Federal Labor Standards Act says as a salaried employee. Because I'm retired. I love it. I'm 48 years old, I get to say I'm retired. All I have to do is wake up, and I make a very nice pension. Guaranteed, it's annuity. It's a great benefit. And then, because I have a bulging disc in my back, the VA tends to compensate me a little bit more for that. I'd like to tell my wife that I don't have disability only some days when I screw up my back and then I'm 100% disabled because I can't get up off the floor. But the point is, if that person wants to maintain their quality of life and they retire, right, and they get, in my case, $57
7.5% of what I was making at 23 years, something like that. What do I have to make to maintain that same standard of living? I'm going to do math in public. 47% of my salary. Right? That's just to maintain my quality of life. Now here's what I'm telling you, please understand this. What they did, they earned their retirement. Okay? So I hope you pay them a little bit more than 47%. But the point is, you don't have to pay them exorbitant salaries to get them on your team for them to even better their quality of life. Now, I encourage you to pay them what they're worth, but I think, and what I try and tell my peers out there is, you probably aren't going to get a salary commensurate to what you were getting in the military. As a lieutenant colonel, I had a very nice compensation, and probably overpaid, to be honest. To be honest. I think senior ranks are overpaid. I think the junior ranks are underpaid. And now, as I'm out in the civilian world, I very highly believe that. So you may see, particularly if you're getting senior people, you may see their salary demands a little bit higher than you would like to see. Okay? So just know that and bring them back down to earth, and I'll help you with that. It was a slap in the face for me. But the point is, you can get them at a great value if you're looking for retired folks. Time to stop talking. And just about right on time. So tremendous value in retirees who are transitioning. And they have a ton of experience. They have 20 years at least of those cultures, norms, and values, lifelong learners, etc. Okay? All right, so I'm convinced. How do you do it? Use the VA. That's one way. A little bureaucratic. That's why I asked David to be here to help advertise for them. If you can afford it, hire a vet, because they come with a network. So I mentioned I was the Dean of the Army Engineer School, so every junior officer, non-commissioned officer, single soldier, now that passed through the Army Engineers through a period of 2 years is now on my LinkedIn network. And here's a standing offer. If you're looking to hire an engineer, give me a job description, I'll post it on my LinkedIn, my personal LinkedIn. When I retired, it was, my network was zero. It's amazing now what happens when you become a CEO and all of a sudden people want to connect with you on LinkedIn. But I do. I was just telling some vets, if you're a veteran, come into my network, and I will use my network for good. So if you have a job, post it on my LinkedIn, hey. And people kind of get that I'm a veteran guy. It's free advertising for your job descriptions. And they're great people. But you can still use the VA in those programs. If you do, call me or hire a vet who can understand that bureaucracy and help you navigate that. It also comes with their own network, like what my network was. They have all the folks that they're still connected with on Facebook and LinkedIn. The challenge is they're probably not geographically co-located because they scatter. But they still have a pretty intense network. And then they'll develop a network amongst the veterans. I have a pretty now intense and large network of veterans in the local area as well. Career Source, I mentioned, the Chamber of Commerce, South Tampa, Greater Tampa, all those have great military councils, particularly with their affiliation with McDill. There's a ton of LinkedIn groups out there. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, just tell me that we met here. You can connect with me and then look at all my groups that I'm a part of. And you can, all kinds of places to find veterans on there. ESGR, Employer Support of the Guard and Reserve. Huge fan of that. I'll take a reservist as well. The challenge is, 1 week a month, 2 weeks a year, if you're willing to do that. But for me, that's a no-brainer. Because they come, and also, if you hire a reservist or guardsman, guess what? Now you have their network. And if you want to hire more, they go back to the armory on the weekends and say, man, that's a great employer. They're really looking to hire more. And next thing you know, you got the whole guard and reserve unit in your unit. Now that 2 weeks out of the year, you probably need to schedule your vacation because all your employers are all going to the same place. All right, there's state organizations, county veterans councils. Frank Strom is the director of Veteran Services for Hillsborough County. We're a member of that one. We're a member of Sarasota County. Very strong, because the veterans population here in Florida is huge. So very strong. Local colleges and universities. My son's going to Florida State next year. Go Noles. He's going to be a freshman. And so, man, I heard this. I think he's a retired Air Force guy. So fired up yesterday at orientation, or 2 days ago at orientation. Just a great guy, a great veterans program at Florida State. They said they were trying to be #1 in the nation. I said, hey, bud, I introduced myself afterwards. I said, do you know Larry Brow? Larry Brow, Lieutenant Colonel retired over at USF. I think they were #2 in the nation. So they're in your backyard. It's going to be tough to beat them. And, USF has a great program. I think they're number 2 nationally. Number 1, I think, is Syracuse, and they're only number 1 because they have a building, and I'm trying to help with a bunch of folks to get Larry's building over at USF. So those are great ways. And they have this really cool networking program too. So if you want to help vets, sign up with USF and you can become a mentor to a veteran who's a college student. Okay? But another great source. There's a ton of nonprofits out there. You know, we used to think of the VFW and the American Legion, still great organizations to advocate on behalf of veterans. But I think they've kind of, with our younger generation, they've kind of been replaced by organizations like Team RWB, Team Red, White, Blue. They get to, their mission is to connect veterans with society through social and physical activities. So they get together, do bike rides, things like that. Then they'll go have a beer afterwards. But those organizations, if you can infiltrate them, that's another network, and I'm happy to help with those introductions as well. And then there are recruiters. There are for-profit, non-profit recruiters out there that specifically hire. Now, a good friend of mine is starting a recruiter. It's called Veterans to Corporate, and she's really passionate about it. She's fantastic. But she said the problem is everybody, y'all want to hire veterans, but you don't want to pay staffing companies to hire veterans. And I get that. I think that's something you should think about. If you're willing to pay staffing companies to hire other folks, why not vets? Sometimes it's a stigma attached to, going back to one of my earlier slides, it's a homeless vet. Well, you know, I'm a vet. I'm a vet. They're all vets. They got talents. They got skills. Hire them. All right. So that concludes my presentation rather abruptly. I have some backup slides, but I think I'm about on time. I would love to take any questions that any of you may have at all whatsoever. Man, I just knocked it out of the park. Every question you have, and I didn't plant any in the audience to get something started. Really, no questions. Well, listen, I'll be around afterwards, and I'd love to talk to any of you. I have a standing offer. I will help any veteran, and if I can't find a fit for them in my company, I get right of first refusal because I'm a greedy SOB, and I want the talent in my organization. Hire vets. I built a company around it. Oh, also. 9, how satisfied are you with the technicians who perform drying and restoration services? We have over 220 survey responses now. And who wants that? Who wants that in their companies? Hire vets. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.